We're going to dive into one of the greatest mysteries in Jujutsu Kaisen to this day, and that is what the hell's going on with Sukuna's flame arrow and black box. So strap in, let's get into it. But one last piece of business, I do need to give a spoiler warning. Like I said, this is still a mystery, so I'm having to piece together clues from deep in the manga. So if you're an anime only, proceed at your own risk. So the first thing we need to talk about is how curse techniques are stored in the brain and that they are considered a black box. Sukuna is the one that tells us that they are stored in the right prefrontal cortex, and then Kusakabe will go on to discuss this, where he talks about the part of the brain where curse techniques are concerned is a black box. Now this term black box is not a JJK term. This is a real world concept that he's referring to here. So this term black box actually comes to us from computer science. And to put this very simply, all it is describing a situation where you don't understand how the mechanism of something works. So a very simple example. Assume we have an orange over here, okay? And then we put that orange through a machine and it becomes an apple. Now, we don't understand how this machine turned the orange into an apple, so we're going to call it a black box. Something that's happening in that machine is making oranges apples, but we don't understand how or why, so we call it a black box. So that's how Kusakabe is using this term here. He's saying, yeah, we understand that curse techniques are stored in the brain, but we don't understand the mechanism of it at all. It's a black box. And an important distinction here is that Kusakabe is not talking about Sukuna's black box in this panel. He's simply referring to the overall general concept of a black box in reference to not understanding fully how curse techniques operate in the brain. All right, so hopefully you're tracking with me thus far because it's about to get a little confusing. And that's because this black box is not a black box. Let me explain. So when Sukuna casts his flame arrow, what we see is black box and open, right? But this black box is not the same black box that Kusakabe was just talking about. This is Gege Akutami censoring what Sukuna is saying. So from here on out, we're going to call this a black square to denote the difference. So black box, the mechanism from computer science where we don't understand what's happening. Black square, Gege censoring out a word. So what's happening in this panel is Sukuna is saying something and we just don't get to hear what he's saying because Gege is keeping this a mystery. And we know this because Gege has used this before. So right here is a panel from Hidden Inventory where Geto is going to save Nanako and Mimiko from those evil villagers, right? And those villagers speak another language. So Gege denotes their speech with these black boxes, and then he translates in the parentheses below. So that's the same thing that's happening here, except we don't get a translation because Gege wants to intentionally keep that a secret. All right, so black box, not the same as this black square. But even with that being the case, this is obviously a really easy parallel to draw, right? And I think Gege did that intentionally. Because on a very meta level, Sukuna's curse technique is a black box to us, the readers, because we do not understand the mechanism of how it works yet. Alright, so if this is Gege censoring this word, then what did Sukuna actually say here? So let's try to piece that together. So one of the only times that Gege has ever commented on Sukuna's flame arrow is in this infographic right here. And as you can see, it's in Japanese. And there is no English version of this that exists. So I translated this with Google Translate. Obviously, the translations are a bit rough, but we can get the gist of what's being said here. And it's Gege talking about Sukuna's curse technique and what he did in Shibuya. So the slashing, the fire arrow, and the domain expansion. And something really interesting is the way Gege talks about this. He says that Sukuna's curse technique is different from most curse techniques because most curse techniques only have one characteristic. However, Sukuna's has at least two, and those characteristics he's referring to are the slashing attacks and the flame arrow. So that's really interesting, right? Because that now tells us that the flame arrow is part of Sukuna's curse technique and it's not someone else's curse technique. In the same way that, Sukuna uses 10 shadows, that's Megami's technique, right? You wouldn't consider that a characteristic of Sukuna's. Now, I'm gonna expand on that in a bit, but the main point from this is that Gege classifies the fire arrow under Sukuna's technique. So what do we actually know about Sukuna's technique? Well, it's got cleave and dismantle, but now we also know that the flame arrow is a part of it. So let's zoom out a little bit and take a look at the domain expansion, aka Malevolent Shrine, with the imagery obviously incorporating an enormous shrine as a part of it. Now this type of shrine used in this way is referring to something where things are stored. And the reason it was sometimes translated as Malevolent Kitchen is because that word is like an ancient word that was used for like an emperor's kitchen where things are stored. Now, bear with me a little bit on that translation because it's rough, but that is the general idea. So if Sukuna's curse technique is confirmed to have at least two characteristics, slashing and fire, and the domain is themed around a storage shrine, then perhaps we can glean that his true curse technique has something to do with storage. And there's a moment that lends credence to this in the Sukuna and Yorozu fight. So as they're fighting, Sukuna is only using the 10 Shadows technique. And Yorozu takes offense to this. She says, "Isn't that your vessel's technique? What about your shrine?" And she's not referring to his domain expansion in this moment, because they were not clashing domains. She's talking about his technique, and she uses the word shrine. Not cleave, not dismantle, not fire arrow, right? So Yorozu understands his technique as shrine. Now, why would she have a different understanding than everybody else? Well, that's because she is from the Heian era, just like Sukuna originally is, back during the period where he would have been in his prime, and probably people would have known a lot more about him and how his technique actually functioned. Now, if Sukuna's curse technique is shrine, and the way it operates is by storing different characteristics or curse techniques, if you want to think about it that way, like cleave and dismantle, like flame arrow, then you might be asking, well, why haven't we ever seen any more? And I think there's a pretty simple answer to that. It's that he's never needed to use anything else. Sukuna is on so much of a different level compared to anyone else that all he's ever needed is cleave and dismantle, right? Except for the moment where he chose to kind of honor Jogo by using flames against him. He decided to bust open the shrine and pull out the flame arrow, right? Now you may be saying, well, why didn't he use anything else against Gojo? And Gojo is a very specific problem, right? Because Infinity was going to deal with anything Sukuna used. It doesn't matter how many different techniques he has in there, unless he specifically has something that would counter Infinity, which he clearly didn't, which is why he went to the lengths to get Maharaga to find a way around Infinity. So it's at least plausible, right, that Sukuna's true curse technique is basically this box of weapons that he can pull out whenever he needs to. Now, what's really interesting about that is that that exact concept is what Gege's previous manga was about. So before JJK, he wrote a one-shot called Number 9, and the hero of Number 9 had an ability where he could basically conjure boxes from another dimension and pull different weapons out of them. And the phrase he used to activate that is the exact same phrase that Sukuna uses when he activates his black box. So I think what's happening here is Sukuna is saying shrine open, and Gege censored it because at this point in the story, he didn't want us to put that together yet. So cool, let's say you're with me on all of that. The interesting question then becomes, how does Sukuna add things to his shrine? How does he get more curse techniques or more characteristics, if we want to call them that, to be able to use? Well, I think the most interesting answer is that he eats people. Eating is everywhere when it comes to Sukuna, and not just in terms of his design aesthetic, aka the centerpiece of his domain expansion, or the literal second enormous mouth on his stomach, but also in his theme, right, and his characterization in general, like his chef's knives, which are used to describe cleave and dismantle. The fact that, Malevolent Shrine can be translated as Malevolent Kitchen. That wasn't just a mistake, that's because of the kanji that was used in that name. Not only that, he always talks about eating in terms of his ideals. I eat when I want to eat. The reason he keeps Uruume around is because they are such a great chef. Gege listed his likes as eating. And in an interview from a few years ago, Gege dropped this ominous statement where he says, "It's just a hunch, but I have a feeling Sukuna is going to eat an important character someday." And if this is true, it might also help explain something else about Sukuna, and that is just how he has so much cursed energy. He's said to have over twice the amount of Yuta Okkotsu, who is literally known for the amount of cursed energy he has. And we know that cursed energy starts and stems from the stomach, right? And Sukuna has a big old conspicuous mouth right on his stomach. So perhaps eating people through this stomach mouth allows him to leech some of their cursed energy. And if Sukuna does gain power by eating things in this way, then on top of everything else, it's also an insane parallel to Yuji, who does the exact same thing. And Gojo did say he'd be scarred with Sukuna's technique. So y'all, did I cook or did I burn the Malevolent Kitchen down? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I want to give a special shout out to a number of people. A bunch of people have been asking for my thoughts on Sukuna's curse technique for a while, but these been all scattered and I've been trying to collect them in a coherent way. So hopefully I did that here, but I do want to give a special specific shout out to Dragon 101 and JC, who recently sent me some sponsored questions in regards to this. So I hope that answered y'all's questions. And again, for everyone out there, hit me with your thoughts and theories in the comments. I wanted to get this video out because I feel like we're probably going to find out soon in the manga, so I had to shoot my shot, right? Anyways, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.